Time is 6:38, so I'll call this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee to order, and we'll start with a call of the roll.
Suresh Bhatia, Peggy Briggs, Kathy Cuoklo,
Here.
Eric Dahlberg,
Here.
John Garofalo, Pat Geyer,
Here.
Greg Gariello,
Here.
Don Kupka, that's me, I'm here, Lindsay Liss,
Here.
Dee Ortner,
Here.
Carlin Reed,
Present.
Paul Rodriguez,
Here.
Kwasi Drusman, Sri Tupul,
Here.
Lois Wassoth.
Here.
Okay, Liz, can you promote me so I can share my screen? And while you do that, public comment. Does anybody in the room want to offer public comment? How about anybody online? No hands raised?
No hand raised.
Okay, and I'm sharing my screen. So we're ahead of schedule. The first substantive item on our agenda is item number 3, the Finance Committee's fiscal year 26 budget process. We sent our budget request letters for fiscal year 26 out to the budget units on August 20th, following our August meeting. And we invited leaders from the budget units to join us at tonight's meeting if they had any clarifying questions. I heard back from leaders at the schools as well as at Minuteman saying they were all set. They understood our request. They didn't have any clarifying questions. The town manager is with us tonight. So Carrie, I'll ask you if you had any clarifying questions related to our budget request.
I don't, but I would like to just say something. No, I'll just.
Thank you. So, no, I don't have any questions. I did notice that you asked for benchmarking data, and we're certainly open to hearing if there are specific things that you would like to see benchmarking data on. We don't need to know tonight, but if they come to you and you want to let us know, that would be great. Otherwise, I think we'll just provide the same type of data that we have in the past and what's been in the budget book in the past.
I think the intention with that, so that came up in the context of the schools, and we reached consensus to make that request for all budget units. And we left the question somewhat intentionally vague and left it up to you, the royal you, all the units, to share the performance metrics that you already use. So we're not asking you to come up with something new. We're interested in metrics that you already use. And importantly, your performance on those metrics, your recent performance on those metrics. Anyone else on that?
That's perfect.
Okay. Our next item number 4, is Finance Committee site visits. And this is intended to be a brief debrief on the recent visits we conducted at the DPW facility on Kaiser Road, the police and fire facility out on Walden, and 2229 Main Street. I personally don't have much to say except to say I thought they were really productive and insightful and eye-opening. I really appreciated the time that leaders at those respective locations took to walk us through their facilities and the deficiencies they've identified. But I'll open it up to the group. Other thoughts from folks who attended?
I thought it was particularly illuminating to see the equipment at the DPW and how inadequate the garaging is for them.
Don?
I would echo that and say thank you to the town staff for making the time for us. It was very surprisingly valuable, but exceeded my expectations. Thanks.
Colin?
I had asked a question of one of the staffers. If you were to
relocate part of the DPW into a new location and leave the other part behind or remodel, so you've basically split it, how to split it. The response was the highway and grounds would be one component and water and sewer would be a different component. Now, I don't think that makes a whole lot of difference right now, but when we think about whether we should expand the CPW or relocate it, how to do it, that might be a component to think about.
Anyone else? Dee?
I just have a question for the people who were there, which was, were you expecting questions that we did not ask? Yes,
Is that directed
I
to the town
do.
manager, Dee?
So I think the difficult thing is everybody was walking around individually, so I don't know what questions people asked. I did spend some time walking with some people, and the questions that I heard or the comments that I heard were what I expected, but I didn't hear everything. I am glad to hear that you think the facilities are inadequate because we do as well. And I think just just to make a note to what Carlin said, I can tell you there are plenty of other people at Public Works that don't think splitting the divisions up is a good thing. So I think that was the opinion of one person. One of the things that we struggle with now, we are operating out of 14 different locations, is the fact that it's hard to have a cohesive organization when you're operating out of so many different locations. And just think of, all of the additional inefficiencies because of that. I think we probably even have additional FTE because of that, because we're not able to share. So I know it's going to be difficult to solve this problem, but we would be looking to reduce the number of our footprint rather than expand it to different locations.
I just want to make a point. We're now just talking about DPW and public safety, right? We'll talk separately about 2229.
I think that's relevant as well. We're recapping all three. So
For that tour, there was a very small but tasteful representation by FinCom. Carlin and I were the only two people who came. And I didn't go to the other, I wasn't able to go to the other.
I did a site visit of 2229, but earlier in the summer.
Yeah, so Kathy had her own view. But Carlin and I were the only ones on this particular visit. But it's interesting for me to hear about the CPW and safety visit, because unfortunately I had to miss that. The 2229 visit was interesting. Carlin, I'm sure will want to chime in. It's a huge project. It's not getting finished anytime soon. Their current estimates are perhaps a little ambitious about when they will have the site actually ready. So while I am going to be very interested in seeing the recommendations in the report of the committee that's going to be coming out in October, I would, my own feeling, and I'm looking at Mary here because I'm asking for a little input on the part of the select board. My own feeling is that it is something we absolutely have to have on our radar and be aware of, and the report will be informative, but it's not a this year or perhaps even next year issue. I think it's further down the road. Mary, do you want to speak to that? Or?
Sure.
Thanks, Lois. I agree with you. What we're expecting when the task force comes into the select board in October is for them to recommend that we continue a path forward. So we continue conversations because we've got to figure out what are the liens, how do we how do we extinguish some of those liens, what are the risks, how do we mitigate those risks, what's the monitoring going forward. So the next step, the next decision point is, do we keep conversations going? So I agree with you. When I was there, my opinion was this isn't going to be ready by 2029. But if the Department of Justice realizes that we are interested, we've got an opportunity for them to make some contour changes while they're doing the remediation that might be consistent with uses that we envision down the road. Okay, so really the point right now, it's just continue conversations, continue interest, continue research, but it's going to take a lot of time.
And I think the corollary to that is stay engaged, but we don't have to anticipate making any large financial or legal commitments in the next year or two at least.
I don't know about that. I don't know. A year, yes, two, I'm not sure.
Okay,
I don't know.
all right. Well, it's something we'd want to revisit in a year, but we wouldn't expect to have to make any actual financial or related decisions on this year.
Right.
Okay.
I agree with that. Do you agree with that, Carrie?
Kathy?
Yeah, with regard to that site, which I'm the liaison to that committee, so I do hear their deliberations each week. I agree with the two of you that it's a long way off. My comment that, I want to direct to Mary is we need a town strategy. I would think that you all feel that MCI is overshadowed 2229, and
Everything else.
you can't make one decision without the other. There needs to be a town-wide, especially, we just talked about the relocation of the town housing of their offices. It has to all be together. So I don't know what you would want to do going forward from a committee standpoint, whether it's a subcommittee to something or I would like to hear from you.
We are working with the town manager. One of the select board goals is to put together what we're calling a land use matrix, which is to look at across one axis, what are all of our needs going forward? DPW, Public Works, anything else? Maybe consolidated town administration. On the other axis, it would be what's coming available, or what's available now, and what are the good matches? So for every cell that's matching, like this need could go at this space, what are the pros and the cons? So that's going to be our first exercise to try to figure out what do we have coming online, what's available, what are our needs, and what are some of the best matches. So it's a long exercise. We're starting.
Thank you.
I'll have some comments when we get to the committee updates, I think, to
Okay.
speak to that. Thanks.
Okay.
Eric, one thing. I think the report is actually going to be out in December of this year, but the advisory task force is going to be making a report orally to the select board at the, October 24th meeting of the select board, but the actual written report won't be out till December. That's my understanding from yesterday's program.
And the committee chair will be visiting this committee in the October meeting, so you'll get lots of,
No.
the 2229
Did we
committee.
decide on what's invited? The 2229 chair?
No, I don't,
I don't know if that was decided, Kathy.
No, we talked about having them come in, just give us a quick update in the context of,
no, you told me you were inviting him.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, well, we should have, at the site visit, he mentioned to me, maybe I had a misunderstanding. He mentioned to me that he didn't want to come in until after the report was completed.
Okay.
So, whether,
I was expecting that you would have a direct email to him.
I'll follow up with them.
Right.
yeah,
Could just be a
we'll
mistake. Yeah.
close the
No
loop,
big deal.
Kathy. Yeah, you're probably right.
Okay. Anyone else?
Just like he didn't want to come.
Paul?
Just a quick comment about the DPW visit is I just wanted to speak very highly of the staff of DPW of trying to use and maximize their space and everything that goes with it to the town's benefit. Like everything that they do and spend a lot of time in doing so. So I just wanted to say that was impressive.
Okay. Kathy, hang on. Anybody online? I don't think we have any members logged in online. Okay, Kathy.
I just wanted to add ditto for the police and fire. They gave us a wonderful tour and insights into how they are using what they have, but how inadequate some of the spaces are.
Thank you. In terms of next steps on both, with 2229 Main Street, as we discussed, we're waiting on the task force's report. On the town facilities, the site visits were intended to be informational, and I hope they were helpful context as we start to think about long-term capital planning. The question of if and how and when we address the deficiencies we all saw, that'll be part of that capital planning exercise. Okay. The next item on our agenda is item number 5. That's the ALS presentation by the fire chief and fire department leadership. That's not slated to begin until 7:10. And I don't think they're all here yet, so we could skip around a little bit and take care of some of the later. Okay. Okay, while you do that, do we want to jump ahead to minutes?
Yeah, we should do that.
Okay.
Okay, we have minutes to approve, and I noticed that on the agenda, it's listed as, let's see this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets. July 8th, August 19th with the select board. It says on the agenda August 20th, but it's really August 19th, just our separate finance committee. So that's the third set. Fourth set is August 22nd. That was the site visit. And the fifth one is September 4th, 2229 Main Street site visit. So all 5 are available. They're in your packet. And I'm asking for any edits on any of them.
Dee.
I have a comment, 2 comments, one on July 8th minutes. And my question is, has the revolving fund analysis been completed? Do we have any idea?
Is that a correction to the minutes, or is that just a question?
No, it's a
follow-up?
question.
I think I can answer that briefly. There was a presentation at the select board meeting this past Monday about the recreation revolving fund and how they plan to spend down that $2 million surplus down to $1 million, plus address a whole number of project areas. And that
Okay.
information is contained in the packet for last Monday's select board meeting.
Okay, all right, that's good. And my second question there was the rec department strategic plan. Has it been completed?
Let's see, our recreation liaison is Peggy Briggs.
Peggy, yeah, she's not here.
And she's not here, so I personally don't know. I think so, but I don't know for sure.
Carrie's saying it has.
It has been completed? Okay,
Okay.
thank you. And then on the August 19th minutes,
Which set?
the first set.
The one with the joint meeting? Okay.
It's on page 109 of our electronic bulletin or packet that we received. What's the role of the Finance Committee in, quote, reviewing proposed capital projects? That was part of the discussion at that meeting.
Okay. Is that a correction to the minutes?
It is not a correction to the minutes, it's a question.
Okay.
Why don't we, if this isn't the item up for discussion, D, is edits to the minutes. So why don't we
Okay.
take that separately, take that offline for now? It's a good question. I'm not trying to shut you down, but let's focus on the minutes. None of those questions necessitate amendments to the minutes,
That
correct?
is correct.
Okay, Greg.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, on the
Right.
July 8th,
Yep.
page 2, was it page 2? Sorry, I just lost my position. Where'd it go? It said where I expressed interest in dealing with the select board, the schools, and the health department in dealing with the Doug White artificial turf situation.
That's under section part
Page
2.
Page 2, yes.
Part 2, right. And I see his class responding to Mr. Gariello, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't believe I expressed interest in dealing with the turf situation, just because I don't have any expertise in the health of the turf type.
Or
I
it
would
says
definitely let
Mr.
you-
Griffith.
What's that?
It says Mr. Griffith expressed interest. right? Or
Right.
no?
Mr. Grip, that's the chair of the Recreation Commission.
Oh, right, yep,
He's
okay, I
willing
see
to
where,
express
yeah,
interest.
okay.
He was
I saw my
responding to
name in
your
the
question.
previous, and I was taking the two. Thank you very much.
So is it okay as it is?
Yep, good, go
Good.
forward.
Any other edits? Okay, can I get a motion, can I do all 5 sets? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I think it's okay.
Can I get a motion to approve the edits, the minutes as presented in the packet for July 8, August 19 with the Select Board, August 19, Individual Finance Committee, August 22nd, site visit with DPW, Police and Fire, and September 4th, 229 Main Street site visit.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay.
Hang on. Any discussion? Okay, we can proceed with a call of the roll.
Okay, Kathy Quokla,
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
Pat Geyer,
Yes.
Greg Gariello,
Yes.
me, Don Kupka, I'm a yes. Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Dee Ortner,
Yes.
Carlin Reed,
Aye.
Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Sri Tupel,
Yes.
and Lois Wassoff.
Yes.
That's 11.
Unanimous, yeah.
Okay, those are the minutes. Thank you. We're all caught up.
Thank you very much.
I think we can go back to the ALS presentation if the fire chief and the fire department leadership are ready.
I didn't realize until a moment ago that I needed to present over Zoom.
We can,
You're speaking out of his speaker.
Where's it, Kathy? Kathy, okay. I'll check.
I know we're early, so we can cover some other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Liz, how about correspondence?
There's been no new correspondence that's been received since the packet was developed in regards to Anthony's comments, that there was emails that were forwarded out by yourself prior to this meeting.
Okay, so it's just my emails to the members of the committee? Okay.
Let's do liaison reports. I'm still ready.
Yeah, why don't we'll cover liaison reports. I'll pull up the compiled report. Thanks, everybody, for your submissions. I personally find these really, really informative. It's getting longer and longer, though, every meeting. It's not 5 pages. Anybody have any clarifying questions about the updates that were submitted?
I had about
Colin.
3, but only 1 per thing. On CPC for Kathy, I saw that in the applications, 1.5 million has been applied for. Do you know how much is available for CPC?
No.
No, okay. Second, let's see, is for Shri. There was a really good discussion that you did on the planning board. Took really good notes, and I appreciate that. There was a discussion about the formula business, Blue Mercury, and how it would essentially swap out one formula business for another. Do you know, or did they mention, how many spots are left for formula businesses in the Concord Center District?
They didn't say, no, they didn't say, they didn't come, there was no discussion on that topic.
Okay, all right. And the last one was for Dee and Pat about the schools. During the school meetings, did they talk about the status of the Peabody School or about the status of the Thoreau Field renovation projects?
Not really, no.
No? Okay, okay, thanks, that's all I have.
Okay, anyone else? Any questions? Other updates?
Yeah, I have an update that didn't make it into the spreadsheet, and that is on MCI Concord. The committee, the advisory board, has formed subcommittees to do some focused work. That's one point. Second point is that there was a public meeting presented by DCAM here in the townhouse. It was well attended by citizens who voiced their thoughts on the site, and it was a very thoughtful evening. It was well done. And the third is just to reiterate for everyone that this is not a site we control. This is the state controls what will happen here. And while they want to hear our thoughts, they also have very strong opinions about what should happen with the site. And our control, so to speak, here is through zoning. So anything that we want to influence will have to make its way into a proposed zoning amendment, which won't be voted on until 2026 at a town meeting. So meanwhile, the state will be moving forward with their agenda, which is for housing and clean energy. Those are sort of their two biggest priorities. One of the citizens spoke on to suggest that we really also need jobs for local employment, that companies that are incubated here end up having to leave, and other companies that are incubated in Cambridge could come out here if we had a place for them. I thought that was a great point, economic development. And toward that end, Eric and I drafted a letter to the bridge, which I'm going to distribute copies of now. Please feel free to send your comments. What we're doing here is recommending that the advisory board retain an economic development consultant to look at the municipal costs and of services and the tax revenue that would come in from various uses. It's hard to put, to be specific, but it's conceivable here that in some scenarios we'll be deep in the red from this redevelopment in terms of municipal services that cost more than the revenue they generate, and in other scenarios it could be a big help to our help reduce the percentage, the very high percentage of our revenue that comes from residential property taxes. So the state is giving the town several $100,000 to use to retain a consultant or of our choice, whatever the purpose we would like. And rather than studying something that they're thinking of doing, we could perhaps look at it from our own perspective, and I think we should urge the town to take that approach.
Question?
Yes, Carlin?
Format of this letter, is this going to be a letter that you, Don Kupka, as Finance Committee member, sends to the bridge, or how will this letter be publicized?
I think it should go from the Finance Committee, signed by Eric. That would be.
So this would be from the Finance Committee chair?
Yeah.
Okay. I have no problem with that. I just want to know how this is going to be presented, because I didn't see the bottom line of the person and the address, that sort of stuff.
Right.
And we present this to you tonight. It's still very much in draft form. We present this to the committee for to get a sense of the committee consensus that you'd like us to move forward with this. My thinking on this is that it hit, and we're going to talk about our goals later in the meeting, but it hits on at least 3 of our goals for the year: communications, revenue generation, and staying engaged on, in this context, specifically the MCI Concord discussion, but more broadly, big picture opportunities for development like that, which we talked about earlier in the year.
So not to give you any more work, but in giving you more work, do you want each of us to send back our comments directly to you without anybody else? And then you and Don and whomever else will fashion the final version, and that would be fine from my perspective.
Yes, I would ask that you send your comments to me. We have to be mindful of the open meeting law. We can't deliberate via email, so we can't all be crafting this thing together. in real time over email. That would be an open meeting issue.
So it would just be, I will send comments to you directly.
Right.
Okay.
Greg?
No one else.
I'll just make a comment here so I don't have to send anything to you. It would be good for like next steps of how the people can get involved. Like there's the committee that you just mentioned. Just give what, if I wanted to stay involved, where do I need to go to stay involved with it? That's all, that's my one comment there is,
Good point.
yeah.
Yep.
Kathy?
Dawn, you mentioned that the state has its priorities, which are housing and renewable energy.
Correct.
So they would have a propensity to want that to be housing.
Yes.
Okay. Did the topic, or I'm sure the topic came up, but was the state concerned about the traffic in the circle there? And are they going to figure that in?
They are. That's not on DCAM's plate, and DCAM controls the site, but it is DPW, I'm sorry, Mass, I forgot what the acronym, but they have done a study of Route 2 realignment. They did it before realizing or knowing, being informed that the prison would be closed. So they are revising their work, and I would say highly confident that realignment will be considered. And in fact, one of the more, I thought so many useful comments from citizens at this meeting, but one of them was asking the state to consider, rather than an overpass for Route 2, to go under so that we can have the grade, which I thought was a wonderful thought, so that we could tie the streets together, things of that sort. And I think going full circle back to 2229 and the town's master plan, the degrees of control is an important variable in that matrix of what we can do where. There are places we own, there are things that we have zoning control over, and others that we don't have any control over, but we may like. So I think that's an important variable for us. And regarding zoning, we could zone for mixed use, for example, which would provide ground floor commercial and residential above. That's one way to give the state what they want. One other thing I'm just going to keep, I'll keep repeating this, is that the town's own municipal uses should be considered here. And if we hit a roadblock with the state, we can consider that if we were to move, say, DPW down there, that the current DPW site could be used for housing, and that accomplishes the state's objective.
Can we limit the height of whatever gets put on there? I mean,
well,
I would hate to see a 15-story tower go.
Yeah, they're thinking 50. Yeah, no, just no. I don't know where that'll land, but that'll be a zoning question for sure. And I should mention too that the water plant there is under negotiation for the town to control.
Thank you.
And we have to be mindful about the cost. Go ahead. Yeah, correct.
Kyle.
Eric, I'd really like to see this letter go out sooner rather than later, and I would feel very comfortable relying on you to incorporate whatever edits you get within a very short time frame, put them together and ship this out, because there's a program going on at the League on MCI on November 1st, and it will be the panel from the MCI advisory board that'll be actually discussing, and I'd like to see this letter out before that panel, if possible.
I agree. Thank you, Colin, and that's a good segue. I'd ask folks to take a look. The draft is quite brief. Get back to me with any revisions or questions by end of day tomorrow, Friday. I'll spruce it up over the weekend, and I'll aim to get it to the bridge early next week in time for their deadline to run in next week's edition, if they choose to run it. My sense is the committee is on board with us submitting this letter.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to proceed to agenda item number 5, which is the advanced life support presentation by the fire chief and fire department leadership. While the chief gets set up, I'll just say on behalf of the committee, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. We were all excited to hear about the grant award. Whenever we talk to people in town and the question of new revenue comes up, the first thing people say is, you got to apply for more grants. We need more grant money. And that's exactly what we've done, to the tune of close to $1 million. What we're interested in tonight is primarily the financials of the grant award itself and of the ALS program. So we look forward to your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting us here. And I apologize. I was planning on, I thought I would be presenting from a podium. I wasn't expecting Zoom, so had to change things up a little bit. I'm going to share my screen. And before I get started, I just want to introduce our medical director from Emerson Hospital, Dr. Ryan Kring, has joined us tonight. And I understand that the focus is financial, but I just think there's a lot of value in maybe putting, the medical side to it too. So there's going to be a point where I'm going to invite Dr. Kring to speak. He's going to take about 5 minutes just to explain the difference between ALS and BLS better than I can. I can explain it. He can explain it better. Assistant Chief Brian Whitney, about halfway through the presentation, he's going to take over because Brian did the vast majority of the legwork on the grant, and then along with Assistant Chief Walter Latta, they put the grant package together that was successful. And then I also have with us Lieutenant Peter Ostrowski. He is here just in case there are any questions that he can help with. Peter is a paramedic. And I apologize. I know the focus is financial, but I start off with some things that really aren't financial, and I'm going to go through them as quick as I can. You have most of them in your package, and a couple of the slides have changed. And one slide I want to call to your attention before I even get started. I need to fall on my sword for a moment. The slide that talked about projected revenue in the 3 next fiscal years, there was a flaw with that slide, and the flaw ended up being about a $65,000 difference. The reason for that is because the information that we had from the billing provider had two of the insurance companies miscoded or miscategorized. They should have been categorized in the Medicare category, which would have dropped the rate for the calls that were paid for by that insurance mechanism. So we have that all straightened out. The number goes from, I believe, 530 something down to 459. It still exceeds costs, and you'll see that. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. The corrected slide is in this presentation. Okay, so again, thank you very much for, let's see, I have to do this. I have to go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, here we go. I just told you what the presentation is going to be about, so we don't really need to look at the agenda. This is a question we've contemplated for many years. Should Concord Fire, should we be providing ALS service? Our contention is that we should, and that's why we plan to do it. The fire department providing ALS service is going to improve the availability and the arrival time, the availability of paramedics, and you'll understand that as I go on, and the arrival time of the time of the call till the time of arrival of a paramedic at a patient's side. It's going to increase our availability. We're going to be better able to meet the national response standards, and it's going to enhance the availability or the stability of ALS in Concord. Ironically, as we were putting this together about 2 weeks ago, Exeter Hospital in Exeter, New Hampshire announced that they were going to be terminating their intercept service. And when we read the article, it was strikingly similar to what happened with Emerson Hospital in 2008, 2009, when it just became essentially financially unsustainable for them in their position to be providing that service. So we included that just as a point of interest with a link. If you wanted to take a look at it, there are a lot of similarities between that and what happened here. We've been the provider of EMS services since 1951. Prior to that, it was the police. Back in those days, it was a skill set that was limited to really just basic first aid, bandaging, splinting, put the person in the ambulance and head for the hospital. In the 70s, that started to professionalize a bit. Massachusetts started requiring certification, and with that came increasingly more advanced skills. In the early 1980s, that's when Emerson Hospital, it was actually 1982, I believe, because I have been working in this system long enough that I was here before them. In the 1980s, Emerson Hospital introduced the first hospital-based ALS system in the state. They did it with 2 paramedics. They did it Monday through Friday. And not too long after they started to grow, and they quickly went to a 24/7 service. A lot of demand. They were serving 14 communities, and they, and those of us who were here before them, we got to see the difference. We got to see the difference it made in patient outcomes. They were doing things that we weren't capable of, certified to, and we were able to truly see different outcomes. 2009, much like the Exeter story, it just became financially burdensome, and Emerson started to move away from that, and it left the local communities somewhat struggling with how we were going to handle it. So, in partnership with Emerson Hospital, there were 12 towns that formed the Samara group, which you've seen throughout this presentation, Central Middlesex Emergency Response Agency. And I apologize, I'm talking so fast. I'm trying to be respectful of your time. So with Emerson, the towns formed that group, and that group in the immediate contracted with Pro EMS Professional Ambulance out of Cambridge to come out and provide ALS service until a solution was arrived at. So the group then issued an RFP for a provider, and it turned out in the long run, Pro was the successful, they were awarded the contract. They've been the provider for going on 14, 15 years. And I meant to preface this by saying, if during this presentation I inadvertently say anything that sounds like it's a negative about Pro, I do not intend it that way. Pro has been an absolutely fabulous partner. They have terrific paramedics. They have worked with us hard every step of the way. They continue to work with us, and they're helping us with this process. So it's a very unusual, it's an unusual business model, but they really are a fabulous partner, and we've had great success with them. The problem we have now is dwindling availability. So they were able to provide the level of service for a number of years that we needed in this area. And that consisted of they had 2 trucks assigned to this area with 2 very experienced paramedics each. They were capable of splitting up if they had to, which gave them the ability to handle 4 ALS medical emergencies in the region at one time. In the 2000s, other departments started going to the paramedic level. As that happened, the call volume, which was the source of the revenue for the Samara group, started to go down. And as the revenue started to go down, naturally the availability of resources went with it. And it wasn't really troublesome for a while. It kept up for a while until the last 2 departures from Samara, the town of Acton and the town of Sudbury, 2 departments with significantly higher call volume than others, both less than our call volume, but significantly higher, and enough to really put a dent in the system to where we've now gotten to the point where we have, where we used to have the 2 trucks with 2 paramedics each. We often have 2 trucks in the area with 1 paramedic alone, and occasionally they'll have a student with them maybe to drive and observe and learn. So they're limited now to how many medical emergencies they can handle at once. I'm just going to back up for 1 second. Bottom line, what that means is less availability. We have ALS coming to less calls than they truly should be, and we also have extended response times. So just as a quick anecdote, 2 weeks ago I was sitting at my desk and I heard a medical emergency dispatched for the BD Center. It was a teenager who was had passed out or having some kind of a syncopal episode, and our ambulance was on scene in 2 minutes. It took another 11 minutes for an ALS unit to be on scene. So we would have had ALS on scene in 2 minutes, had we been, currently the provider. I am not going to drill down into these slides at all. These are just to show you there's a distinct difference in the skill level and the expected skills that a paramedic can provide versus a basic EMT. And let me just point out, I keep saying paramedic and EMT, both are EMTs. The basic to paramedic level, it's a certification change. It's a skill level change, but both are EMTs governed by the Massachusetts statewide OEMS protocol. Examples of BLS and ALS emergency responses, the protocol, why you would get one response versus another is always based on the nature of the emergency. I am not drilling down into this. I just put it here. I put it here just somewhat for its shock and awe value that the box on the left is all that an EMT basic is responsible for. Everything on the right is an EMT advanced. That is a certification level that is scarcely used in the state. And then the next page is everything in addition to those two lists, everything that a paramedic is responsible for. And this is the point that I plan to stop and invite Dr. Kring to just kind of give you a sense of the distinction between ALS, BLS, and the value.
Thank you, Chief. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to emphasize here, the difference between BLS and ALS, and it's not something that maybe is commonly known. A BLS provider is able to provide simple medical management, splinting broken bones. In the event of a sicker patient, a ALS response, a paramedic is really able to do a lot of the same things that we can do in the emergency department in the initial part of resuscitation of a patient. A great example would be a cardiac arrest. A BLS provider can start chest compressions. They have an AED, which is a computer that tells, do you shock the patient, but aside from that, they can't administer medications. They can't intubate a patient or put in a breathing tube. Paramedics can do all of those things. And so we're talking about a significant increase in the level of care that can be provided at an ALS level. One of the questions that I'd imagine is, what with Emerson Hospital being in the town of Concord, what is the advantage of having an ALS service? I know that's something that's been asked many times before. And the main advantage of having an ALS service for the town of Concord is, while Emerson Hospital is able to handle a good number of medical emergencies, in many cases, trauma patients or patients with certain types of heart attacks called a STEMI, Emerson Hospital is not able to handle those cases. And so those patients have to be transferred to a hospital in Boston or Leahy Hospital that have longer transport times. And as the chief alluded to, we say in heart attacks, time is heart muscle. And so the quicker you can have that response where you have that level of care that can transport that patient and stabilize them during transport, the better patients will do. Similar with strokes. Again, we follow protocols for stroke entry. Emerson receives, the vast majority of stroke care, but a good ALS response can make a dramatic difference in stroke outcomes. And I hope that no one at this table has ever had to call 911 911. The point here is to give the town of Concord and Concord Fire Department control over this advanced life support service to provide the best medical response to the town of Concord in partnership with Emerson Hospital.
One quick question. Dr. Kring, are you also the chair of the Board of Health for the town of Concord?
That is
I
a
thought I
very
knew
good
who you were.
question. I am an identical twin. My twin brother, Randy Kring, is a Concord resident. He is chair of the Board of Health. I hope that doesn't provide any conflict of interest. But, our father, Roy Kring, was an emergency physician at Emerson Hospital for many years. He's retired now, but it's a bit of a family practice at Emerson.
Got it.
So,
Thank you.
of course. Thank you all. Yeah.
Well, I
Yes,
have
ma'am.
another
Yeah.
question. Can you go back 10, 15 years ago and just tell us, probably through numbers or however, what changes have occurred in the types of incidents that occur, as well as the severity of the incidents, and also the need for this service?
Absolutely.
The upgrade.
Unfortunately, our American population is getting sicker. Our population is aging. Our population has a lot more chronic medical problems. With that, there is an increased incidence in heart disease and strokes. Fortunately, in this area, we don't see that many traumatic injuries, but when we do, they can be quite severe. Having the ability to have an ALS response gives residents of Concord the access to the full complement of what is authorized for EMS care, similar to what you would receive, if you were in downtown Boston or downtown Worcester that have independent EMS ALS agencies.
And have residents come to you saying, why don't we have ALS, or,
So, currently Concord does have an ALS service. It's provided by Pro. I think, again, the main benefit of this to the town of Concord is having control of the service and being, as the chief alluded to, Pro EMS is an excellent partner. They work closely with us at Emerson Hospital as well, but they're a business, and you may have heard there's been a significant shortage in paramedics for the state and nationally. It's something that is really concerning to me as a EMS medical director. And so as a result of that, the availability of paramedics in the entire state is limited. Having the ability to staff, have an ALS service that is staffed to the needs of the town as opposed to the needs of a third party, I think really benefits the town of Concord. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
I promise we're getting to the numbers soon. So I just want to kind of re-emphasize, we do provide ALS service. We've been providing ALS service since the 1980s. We use a third-party provider for it. So we're not adding a service. We are simply bringing the service in-house, if you will, and training our own people up to that next level of certification that they already work in that realm. So it's not, this isn't new. It is not even expanded, because we're not using additional personnel for it. All right, so what happens when you call 911 today? I'm going to be really quick. You call, you speak to a dispatcher. They get the sense of your call. They get the nature of the call. It's coded based on the nature, and then they will dispatch the appropriate response. They'll dispatch an ambulance, a fire truck, a police car, and if coded as an ALS call, ALS from Pro EMS. This is a recurring question, and we did receive some questions from the board. We've tried to incorporate them into the show, into the slideshow. I'm speaking fast because I'm trying to get, I'm trying to be respectful of the time.
Slow down.
So that's a recurring question that we hear all the time. And the number one question, and I'll just answer this one, is why do we send a fire truck? We send a fire truck because we need the additional personnel on scene for safe movement of the patient, for the safety of our crews. It helps us to avoid injuries with having two people doing all of the lifting. NFPA 1710, which is the standard that we measure our responses against, also includes provisions that to be in compliance with that standard, an ALS call should have 4 people on hand. because of equipment, supplies, the complexity of the patient care going on doesn't lend itself to doing patient care and moving the patient. So that's why we send the fire truck. Then one of the other reasons that that the fire truck goes is because often, depending on where our fire companies are, we're very busy. We're doing a lot of calls. We're doing over 4,000 calls a year. Often that fire truck is first due. They're the first piece of apparatus to arrive. And the staff on that truck and the equipment they carry, they're capable of doing everything that the ambulance can do except transport. So that's, that's another primary reason they go. The fire department, we are currently providing the BLS and ALS service. We do it in a two-tiered system. We provide the BLS service in-house with our own staff and our own vehicles. And the second tier is the ALS level that we are bringing in the third-party provider. I am going to just kind of pass by this slide because I've already explained it. And now we're going to move on to questions that are received in advance from Finance Committee members. We're getting closer to numbers with dollars. But I want to stop on this slide for a moment. These are all neighboring communities. Lexington and Bedford I don't know that they're technically within the Emerson catchment area, but the others are. And I think this slide is important because you'll see that Concord has the second highest transport volume of any community on this list. And of those transports, we are providing ALS care 42% of the time. And the minimum of any of those other communities is 60%. And that is for one reason. That's availability. It's availability, and it is something that we can fix. We have it within our power to fix this.
Sorry, is that the most recent year?
That is FY 20. It's FY 24. That's the year ending June 30th.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of a striking number. That there's 42% of the time is far below. And I'm showing you local towns. We've seen this list for many, many communities, many regions, and those numbers are the norm. We are definitely outside the curve on this.
Can you just explain why availability plays into that number? Just really quickly.
Well, we have to make a transport decision when we're on scene, and if we've called for ALS, and ALS is not available because they're down to the 2 trucks with 1 medic each, they're not available, or they're coming from such a distance that we have to make a transport decision to go to the closest hospital as opposed to the closest appropriate hospital. And that was what Dr. Kring was speaking of when he said if someone is having a STEMI, a condition, a cardiac condition, and that one specifically, a STEMI, that Emerson Hospital is not the closest appropriate facility. It's the closest facility. As EMT basics, if we have to make a transport decision that we can't stay on scene any longer, waiting for a paramedic unit that may be coming from some distance, we have to go to Emerson, where that person is going to be, and please, Dr. Kring, correct me if I'm wrong, where that person will be evaluated, stabilized, then put in another ambulance and sent to an appropriate facility. At the paramedic level, that person can go from the scene directly to the facility. So it's just all about available resources.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Your paramedics are coming from 10, 15 miles away, whereas your ELS can get you to Emerson in a shorter period of time. But so that's why you're going to just have to transport with the BLS service.
Yeah, gotcha. No, it makes sense. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then the other way, and we have to look at it this way, when we have to make a transport decision, if ALS is 10 miles away and Emerson Hospital is 2 miles away, Emerson Hospital becomes our ALS. So we have to go there. And we do it knowing that this person's going to end up at Leahy, or they're going to end up at Mount Auburn, or they maybe need a cath lab. And we are powerless to do that because it violates OEMS protocol, and that's what we're governed by. I'm going to turn it over at this point to Assistant Chief Whitney.
Can I just briefly interrupt, just a housekeeping issue? Liz, I got a note from a FinCom member who's online who's saying we can't see him because he's listening, but we can't see that he's there.
Needs to be promoted. Who is it?
Quasi.
We don't
Quasi.
We don't typically promote them, so I see that he's there.
Okay, so you can see it, all right,
He's
okay,
online. He's here and he's online.
Yes, there's just no hands raised at the moment.
all right.
All right, good. Well, thank you again for having us. Again, Assistant Chief Whitney. And clarification, that 42% is 2023. That's on this slide. So again, just to follow up on the emphasis that when the department looked at ALS, as the chief said, as Dr. Crane said, we're currently providing ALS. It just doesn't make more sense internally versus externally for the provider. And going back the last 10 years, because of all the issues that we've mentioned, you can see the trend is going down in ALS availability. And there are certain times where ALS on scene is just more beneficial to the patient. 2020 and 2021 were the COVID years. Nothing in life happens anymore without talking about COVID. And we experienced some changes, a drop in call volume for a lot of reasons, including people did not want to go to, they didn't want to go to a hospital. They didn't want us in the house. So in turn, when our emergency response volume dropped, ALS became more available because there was nowhere near the number of calls in the region. But once we all came out of COVID, we can see that trend continued back downward. So that was the emphasis of the department's review of it. We did look at some data, and again, for the past 10 years, we've had an average run increase across the department, including EMS-related calls and medical transports, about 4% a year. That trend just continues. The nature of the town is with some growth combined with the population demographics have just we've always seen an increase in service. So if our runs continue to increase and the ALS product is situated like it is now, we could just project that we potentially are going to even see more of a drop in ALS availability. And again, I want to emphasize, like the chief did, Pro has been an excellent partner. I've talked to Pro a lot with this, and it is unique that they're helping us out immensely to help us be successful in this transition. So now we're going to start to get into a few revenue projections, and again, the department is looking to provide the best service we can. We currently provide ALS. We think we can provide the best internally, but we know that any type of service, and again, in this case, we're not adding the service where I provide ALS, no additional personnel, et cetera, but there's costs and revenues with it, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. The revenue side, we were asked a few questions of what the expected revenue are and the assumptions. Revenue from ambulance billing is complex. It's an insurance industry based thing, and there are a whole bunch of factors into it, which we're not going to get into the details in. We're just going to describe how the current system works and what the difference in revenue would be and how it would impact the increased costs, just to see what the difference is of the two systems. So we went back to 3 full years to show actual system revenue. This is a new slide from your presentation. After we received some follow-up questions, we thought this might help clarify it. So in Samara, the way the billing works for any participating agency is the split to the fire department compared to the Pro EMS who provides ALS is based on the insurance type, not precisely whether it was an ALS call or BLS call. For example, if we have an ALS call that's billed to Medicare, that agreement has chosen to still send all of that revenue to the fire department. So we are getting some revenue, even though it was an ALS call, and Pro is getting revenue for other ALS calls. So it's more important, I think it's more accurate or more consistent to show you what the revenue currently is and what the change would be based on that model. So that's why you're not going to see us continue to talk about an ALS call specifically versus a BLS call. So the last 3 years, total system revenue in the $1 to $1.2 to $1.3 million range. You'll see in fiscal 21, Concord got about 67% of the revenue, so a lot of the revenue is already coming to the community based on the agreement. We get at least 2/3 of the revenue that's generated in the system. And again, because we provide the service, the patient demographics, the call volume will exist as it does whether we provide ALS or Pro. That's all going to remain consistent. So this would be the appropriate formula to project cost and revenue off of. So we're already getting about 67 to 70% of the system revenue. We didn't put fiscal 24 in because of a billing nature. there's a 90 to 120-day turnaround, so they're still collecting money from fiscal '24. In the handout you'll get at the end, we were asked specifically about it. You'll see a note on it that says it's a to-date number because it's still a rolling system. As the chief mentioned earlier, our initial projections, because a few of the insurance vendors were listed as private insurance, which is a higher pay rate compared to Medicare. We used that initial projection. Once we had that identified, this is the corrected projection. So again, fiscal '25, which is what we're in, fiscal '26 next year, we're still using Samara, but we just put the projections in to show what it would look like if Concord were providing it directly, so that we can have a feel of what the cost would look like versus the projected revenue. So based on, and again, we're conservative, we use the fiscal '24 transports. They ebb and flow year to year, similar to the stock market, but over time is about a 4% increase. So if we just stuck with a static transport rate of just under 2,000 patients, and we looked at what the projected additional revenue would be from what Concord currently gets in the system model, it's around that 459 in fiscal '25. Again, that's just a hypothetical because Pro is getting that money now because it's still providing ALS. So those metrics that we looked at the slide prior, the actual revenue received, that's how we made that projection based on that same modeling.
So it's the additional, not the total.
Correct. And I think that's in the handout. We have some follow-up questions, exactly, yeah. So this number might be, I think for projected for fiscal '25, the total might be, 1.3, 1.4. It's in the handout. And of that, we get about 2/3 of it, and then the additional will be that 459,000. And just overlaying that to the projected costs, we're looking at projected costs of around 300,000 if we were to start providing it in the current fiscal year. So again, to reemphasize, the cost on this is not new personnel, it's not a new service. It's existing personnel who are going to be now trained from EMT basic to EMT paramedic. And there's a salary structure change because they're going to be paid as a paramedic now instead of an EMT basic. That's the bulk of that cost. But it's the same people who are currently employed and already receiving a salary. And then there's obviously some costs for additional supplies. The paramedic supplies are going to be a little more expensive, and in addition to the basic supplies that we currently support. So we just put a projection in of what it would cost on an annual operating expense, revenue versus expense.
Is it the same number of vehicles?
Same number of vehicles. So basically, the way to think about it is our call volume right now, our demographics, everything is going to stay the same. We're going to the same calls. I think I have it in a future slide, but I'll answer it now. We're going to the same calls. The ambulance is going to those calls anyway, and if it's a BLS call, we transport them, right? And if it's ALS, Pro jumps in the ambulance with us. So we'll be using the same exact equipment we have, going to the same exact calls we have, but just taking the same people who are currently going to those calls and making them paramedics, so they can deliver that care quicker and even more efficiently. I would say a touch more efficiently, because you'll have us arriving, and we won't need that extra vehicle, those extra people coming in to get the ALS level. So that's why we don't need additional vehicles. Our current ambulances will be able to be licensed and upgraded to ALS.
They can be, okay.
They're all set for that.
We have a few other questions. Colin and then Paul.
I really like this slide because it shows the net difference, which is going to be about $159,000 in your hypothetical. So that's what you're expecting if you were to make that change right now for fiscal year '25, about $159,000 is the net that this new program would net, right?
Correct, yes. Yeah, and fiscal '27, that would, if we start, our projection is to start with, by the time we get the training done and licensing. And I'll speak briefly on the grant. Again, the grant we got is a one-time grant, and it's a one-time expense. It's to take existing people to train them. That's a one-time cost to train personnel. And once they're trained, that cost goes away, but, when the grant goes away, that's what it was for. And then that revenue, they'll start operating as a paramedic, and that fiscal '27 revenue will be the addition, you'll see the additional expenses combined with the additional revenue. We're projecting, potentially up to $150,000 or so a year. That'll be over and above the additional costs.
And one thing, and for Brian and I agreed before we started that if we felt that something was missed, that we would jump in on each other. So we talked about this ahead of time. I just want to remind you that the revenue projections are based on the FY '24 call volume. We know those numbers are going to go up, but in the interest of being conservative and in the interest of under-promising and over-performing, we're showing you the FY '24 transport numbers through all 3 years. We actually project FY '27 to be roughly 2,250, 2,300 transports, because that's the trajectory that it's always on.
And if it helps, actually, real quickly, if you look all the way back to fiscal '21, this is actual revenue collected. And these numbers I did put in, I should clarify to you, as well as, just because if it was Concord revenue, I put those net of billing fees. So in fiscal '21, the actual revenue received by Pro ALS was $346,000, and it continues to grow. So our projections are, the projection of getting into the 400s, we feel that we're very comfortable with, knowing that we have recent history of 350 to 400 in actual revenue that went to Pro, and that would be retained by Concord, which will easily, offset a projected cost a couple of years beyond that of that 325.
Okay, Paul, and then Lindsay, and then Pat.
So my question, which I probably know the answer to, but I want to put it out there, is that this assumes that the current personnel want to take this training, and I'm assuming they do, but I would like you to confirm that.
Sure. Yes, that is for the current personnel. We're lucky because the grant has a 2-year operational period. We were awarded it in July. Classes were already filling up for September, but we were lucky to get 3 people already enrolled and started in training in September because of interest. We have 4 more that are enrolled in programs and a few more that are already looking at a couple different programs. So we do have the interest. We have people already in training and already enrolled in a couple different programs starting next calendar year as well. And that's important because the grant is a 2-year performance period. So we need to actually get folks trained and certified within that 2-year window, barring any exigent circumstances that they would provide a extension to. But yeah, we're above the 50% part, just trying to get people into this fall. We were well underway to getting the people trained.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And I apologize, just really quick, any turnover will be replaced with paramedics. So we're accounting for some of it that way as well.
I just have a couple of questions. The first one is around the assumptions on the expense increase. And it sounds like that is because those folks are becoming paramedics. And you mentioned that there's a labor shortage for paramedics, right? And they're in demand. Is there a risk that increase has to be greater just to retain those folks because they have good job opportunities elsewhere?
I guess I'll start with this, and then the chief or the town manager can jump in. That's a risk everybody's experiencing. We've seen a big drop in applicants, even in the current position we're in for firefighter EMT basics. Still plenty of applicants that are applying for the job, which is good. And the reason I tell you that is because I think Concord is providing a very competitive wage for firefighter paramedics. So without having a hard and fast way to verify that, for Concord specifically, we've noticed that with other departments' trends for hiring firefighter EMT basics, we're still having better success with that level.
Okay.
And we're gonna assume that that's gonna transfer to the medic level, again, because of the competitive wages that the town does generously offer, and that we have a good work environment in the community. So we think our attraction.
So you've kind of factored in very competitive wages into
Yes,
these
yeah.
expenses. Okay.
Correct.
And then the second question is on the revenue projections. What I'm struggling to understand is if your assumptions are based on steady transport volume, why the rates go up. Is that because reimbursement rates go up?
I should probably tell you that, actually, yes. The Samara agreement, and like a lot of non-Samara folks do, every year they analyze their rates.
Yeah.
And the rates will go up.
Okay.
In Samara, the rates go up 3% every year. So even if you had a static transport rate, exactly, you're
So
going to have
that's-
a slightly higher increase
Okay.
because the actual reimbursement rate went up.
Okay, got it, okay.
But then there could be quantity, right? Number of transport
Correct.
increases as
If-
well. So what's the sensitivity of just adding on another person in fiscal year '27? How do that $323,000, what does that become if you add one more person, one more paramedic? Because right now, you're telling me we're going to keep personnel stable.
Correct, yeah, correct. And that would be, I guess, we would look at that as if the call volume continued to increase, we'd have to look at that staffing issue, but that would be an issue we'd have to look at currently as well, even if we weren't providing ALS, because again, our personnel is still going to those calls. So although they're related, I think it's a different analysis than the paramedic side. Because if the run volume, if the transports went up to 3,000 next year,
Yes.
we're currently doing those transports as BLS providers, so we would have to look at that staffing issue anyway. So the ability to provide ALS really isn't gonna change the demand on staffing, more so the run volume is. And we're already in that boat to have to deal with that issue.
So there's not really a margin contraction that happens. You think of it as being stable. If you add another person, you've got revenue that increases, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
if down the road the run volume were to increase, that there is gonna be increased revenue, which there is currently for the BLS level, more so for ALS, and that might help offset the cost. The comparison might be, if anyone recalls, 10-ish years ago, A3, right? This was an exact issue we had when we had to add the second ambulance into full-time service into West Concord, because our run volume was going up so high, we were relying on mutual aid coming into Concord at like a 10-to-1 ratio, so we were way above an accurate or a legitimate standard for that. So I think that's where I'm coming from, if that makes sense, so that even though we weren't medic at the time, we were still responding to the calls, we were the transport agency, and the call volume dictated the need to add some additional personnel. So that call volume, regardless of where it stands, we're going to the call anyway, and just the ability to provide ALS is a kind of a separate analysis to the call volume itself. Any other? So again, somewhat of that system revenue, these are projected system revenue figures, and again, in fiscal '27, when Concord starts providing ALS, that bigger increase in fiscal '27 is that gap in calls that are currently not receiving ALS now. Naturally, we're gonna be able to provide that ALS, so we have a great, I think you saw the heat map earlier when we sent it out. So we're gonna be able to arrive on scene and provide that service right away. Again, just wanna emphasize that the ability to do that, and the reason that will happen is protocol-driven, it's medical need-driven, it's not just because we have the ability to. We have some equipment at the BLS level that we can only use in certain medical emergencies, and we cannot use in other occasions just because we thought it would be helpful to use. So the need for ALS is protocol-driven through OEMS, through our medical director, and then payment is dictated through insurance vendors also, making sure that the service is provided when medically necessary. So there is no reaching or searching just to provide the skills. It's all protocol and medically driven. And again, the personnel costs and the supply costs, these were the projected figures for the, again, paramedic pay scale and annual training. And again, I know we just want to really emphasize it, that that's just additional pay and training for current personnel, so it's no new hires. And again, we project that $50,000 or so. We talked to a couple other departments, Lexington and Sudbury, and got estimates of what their ALS supplies are. But that additional supply cost will clearly be offset by the additional ALS revenue.
Question on that. Do you, in the green bar, capital
Yes.
equipment facilities, fiscal year '25, do you really mean $275 for capital equipment, or should there be a K after
I
that?
forgot a K, yes. Yeah. That's the next grant, if we can get it for $275,000.
Yeah, how many personnel are involved in the program?
So total in the grant program will be 14 current people getting trained, but we'll have at least 16 paramedics. And again, that'll be current positions if it's done through attrition, as the chief mentioned. And that's because we have 4 shifts, an ambulance in each station. There'll be 2 medics on each ambulance. That gets us our 4. And that's the minimum that we need. As future hirings will also target paramedics, because just to have some additional medics for both the ability to backfill and cover when you have vacancies is helpful. And then, as we did in the EMT basic level years ago, as EMT basic expanded, as we continue to hire, and we can then license, and it does require licensing, we could potentially license the engines as well to provide ALS and further enhance the ALS service. So 16 people minimum to get it started, and that's, again, to cover both sides of town on the 4 shifts that we have.
Under the category of unintended consequences, I mentioned for Anthony's benefit, because he's online, that it looks like the salaries will be higher, and so our pension contributions will have to commensurately rise, I imagine. Thanks.
Correct. Yes, correct. And I have in fiscal '25, really, that should be potentially fiscal '26. The reason it was in an earlier year of us providing the service is as we begin to license and develop our internal policies and work with the medical director, we'll need to purchase the equipment and train on the equipment prior to delivering service. So that equipment has to be purchased in the fiscal year prior to delivery. It may not be in fiscal '25, it may be in fiscal '26, but it'll be one of the years. And again, that's to outfit all 3 ambulances, and 2 because the 2 are staffed 24/7, and the third one acts as a backup for if we have recall folks for some reason. If we have an ambulance tied up for a long time, we'll recall folks. We could potentially put the 3rd ambulance in the service. And just as importantly, it also will act as a reserve for the first 2 ambulances. And to have a set of reserve equipment, which OEMS requires as well, to maintain the ability to provide ALS care, we'll store it on that 3rd ambulance so that we can always maintain the 2 ambulances in service. And if everything is in service, we have that 3rd ambulance available if we have a recall of staff. That makes sense.
Does this have any impact on the design of a future fire station? It doesn't sound like it.
No,
It doesn't affect.
I would say a minimal amount, because we probably have a preferred enhancement to EMS supply storage and EMS medication storage.
It doesn't have an impact that we wouldn't already have. I mean, because right now, I mean, some of you were on the tour a few weeks ago. Our EMS storage, whether it be just for BLS supplies or ALS supplies, it needs to be improved. We need a secured facility for that. So that would all be part of any plan. If we were building a new fire station today, I would have been pushing to design an EMS storage room that could accommodate all of this. The garage space, we're talking about the same vehicles, so it really doesn't impact fire station design.
So I have a question for the person who hasn't spoken yet. I believe are you an ALS trained individual at this time?
I am.
Okay, can you just talk a little bit about the differences in the 2 levels, and then also the impacts, if any, to your confidence level of your work?
And come up to the microphone and spell your last name, please. Thank you.
All of that.
I can do that. Again, as everyone else said, thank you very much for having us. My name is Peter Ostrowski, Ostroskey. So for the first part of your question, just what the difference was in providing that level of care. There's certainly a lot of different skills that you need to learn and be trained on. And I think Dr. Krink kind of alluded to it. Pre-hospitally, there are some things that you can do as a paramedic that will you're able to do ahead of time as the hospital will do once you get there. So whether it's starting IVs or doing cardiac monitoring, delivering IV medications, even up to being able to pace the heart, which is sending electrical current through the heart to make it beat more effectively, or even inserting a breathing tube. So those things at the ALS level definitely increase the patient chance of survival and increase their overall outcome when you're able to do that in the field and have that prepared for the hospital when you get there. And then you have that transfer of care where you're able to tell them, I did all these things, and here's the list of the medications I gave and all my interventions, and then they can take the patient from there and continue to go forward. At the BLS level, there's still plenty of things that you can do, but most of it is going to be a little bit more supportive, and you're going to be preparing the patient for transport mostly and trying to get them to the closest appropriate facility. And I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Hand-holding, are you telling me?
No, there's still a lot. There's plenty of splinting, or there's a limited pain management that we can do just because of the medications that we can give. certainly, CPR and AED use is vitally important for us. So a lot of things along those lines. I think they had the list of them in one of the previous slides too.
So, in your opinion, should everyone be trained up to the ALS level?
I think it's the best level of care you can get pre-hospitally. Yes.
Not every patient needs an ALS transport.
That's
but the
true,
sick
I
patients
guess.
do.
I understand that, yeah. But
If you have a
the,
sprained ankle, you don't need a paramedic.
no.
Okay.
Although it might be nice. Okay.
Okay.
Should we, what else should we be asking you?
That's a really good question. I'm not
Are
exactly.
your shifts long, or are they?
Our shifts, whether we're at the ALS or BLS level, are going to be the same.
The same?
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Lindsay?
Thank you, ma'am.
I had a question about the grant, is that
Yes.
okay? So, and the grant says that, that we also have to put in 5%, right, of the
Yes.
cost? So is that going to be part of the budget that's going to be put forth for the town? Or where does that, or is that like a town article? How does that going to work, that 5%?
So
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, basically, because it's a 2-year window, we've incorporated into the existing budget, because we've already got people in.
Okay, so it's
training
already
right
in the
now.
budget? Okay.
We're going to do our absolute best to absorb it within our budget.
Oh, okay, got it, okay.
Okay.
And
I'll-
it is around that 45,000
40
over 2
something,
years.
yeah.
It's
Over 2 years,
so it's
okay.
22,000 per year, 22.5.
I'll just I'll observe we're approaching an hour. We want to be respectful of your time. Before we get back to questions, did you have other content you wanted to present?
The only thing is, I'll go through very quickly here, because we have hit on the AFG grant. We were asked about the matrix that we use. We analyze matrix. We currently do report them in various town reports. And I guess it was an earlier meeting I was at. So the benchmarks that we use, the same standard the chief was talking about, is the importance of arrival times. The recommendation is within 4 minutes travel time for BLS, and then within 8 minutes travel time for ALS, provided the BLS did arrive within that 4 minutes. On top of that, there's some turnout time and some alarm processing time. Gives you a total of really up to 6 minutes processing time. And again, this is kind of the wrap-up, which is good timing, but we were asked about metrics. These are the metrics that we tracked. These are metrics that we looked at to analyze the program. And we could see that we've been able to deliver BLS, meet that BLS benchmark, meet that national standard about 80% of the time under our current system. And again, the combination of call volume, if we have a bunch of calls at once, and some of the distances of the town, the outer portions of the town geographically, it's hard to make it into that 4-minute travel time range. But absent those, we're doing pretty good at hitting at least 80% of the time for that. Recently, our paramedic arrival time only meets that ALS benchmark 53% of the time. And again, this is a chart you may have seen in some of the town reports that just shows that the majority of the time we're there within that 6-minute response time or less. And this is kind of wrapping it up anyway, is that heat map kind of shows you the density of a lot of calls. And then as you start to spread out to the outskirts of town, if you look up to the very north, you'll see what's Middlesex schools, who we responded a frequent amount. This is a fire and EMS map, but the two correlate pretty similarly. And you look where Station 2 is and where Station 1 is, they're both right in or right outside the core of our response volume, and that's what's going to help us be able to provide the better ALS service. So if we're getting there 80% of the time on that benchmark for the BLS standard, we're going to at least be able to meet that benchmark for the ALS standard, basically because we're already getting there that fast. We're already providing the BLS service, and we're well-positioned in those areas to then arrive with the paramedics, as paramedics, within that BLS bench time, which is going to dramatically improve our ALS response time.
What's the hotspot, the big one in the middle?
The big one, the big one in the middle is the Baker Ave area. So Baker Ave has a few of the medical buildings,
Yeah.
and the hotel that's there now, and a few other facilities that were there a decent amount. And then the other,
Care 1 and Newbury Court.
the circle right around Station 2 will be those Care 1, Care 1 and Newbury Court.
Makes sense.
It's an interesting map.
It is, yeah, so that, like, the real bright spot is probably 68 Com Ave, Care 1, Newbury Court, that whole area. But it does emphasize that the ability to meet benchmarks, and ability to meet the ALS, arrival times and provide that care as rapidly as possible. We're well-positioned to do it. And we have the call volume to do it, meaning the skill degradation really won't be an issue because we're such a busy service that you're gonna get the repetition of doing the skills because of the run volume that we're at. There are regional services that probably do less volume than Concord does alone. So the call volume, our location, and the ability to do it with current personnel, I think just lines everything up to be successful, provide a great service and no additional cost, which I just took half your summary slide.
So, just very quickly, I just want to, I want to go back real quick to the retention and recruiting themed question. We have, we don't have an awful lot of difficulty attracting people. When we do a job advertisement, we get a fair number of applicants, and when I speak to other fire chiefs, they don't always have that same experience. So we're doing pretty well with that. In many ways, our department is very similar and this plays into it. Our department is very similar in culture and structure to Lexington. Lexington has 56 paramedics on the department, so they've not had a problem keeping people, and I don't really anticipate that once we are up and running that we will have that problem. We actually have the opposite problem with retention. Over the last several years, we've lost, I believe the number is 5 firefighter paramedics who were working here. We hired them as firefighters, with some look down the road at what we would be doing. And their inability to practice at that level because of our license level caused them to move on to go to an ALS department so they could practice at the level that they were trained to. Otherwise, they would still be here. So it's recruiting and retention is challenging, especially in public safety these days, but we have managed to still do pretty well with it, and we get some really good people. So in summary, we are delivering less ALS service than we can. The community is receiving a different level of service than neighboring communities. We're positioned to eliminate that gap. It is a service level change. We don't need any additional personnel. And the service level change, it's going to provide a higher level of service, and any added cost is going to be offset by additional revenue. And that is the end of the presentation. Again, thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer them. We do have, for the questions that were submitted after we did the presentation, we do have written responses. So we packaged them. We packaged them up. If there's more questions, please feel free to send them through the chairs. And there are some select board questions also included in that we answered them all in one package.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to the members of the Finance Committee for any last questions, but I know there were some late questions submitted by the Select Board. I just wanted to check, Mary and Terry, were the Select Board's questions answered? If not, would you like to pose any follow-ups?
Let me just respond really quickly. Thank you, Eric. We did collect some questions, and many of them were answered tonight, but I think that this is such an important topic that I would invite you to come to the Select Board.
Absolutely.
Not all of our questions were answered, but most of them were. So if you want to come there, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, we'd be happy to.
Thank you.
The questions that were submitted in writing to us that came in late are in that package.
Yep.
But, I know that there will be more questions, and we're happy to meet in person.
That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Members of the Finance Committee, any last questions?
The big question we haven't
Colin.
talked about is how are you going to set your rate? I'm a firm believer that if you're going to set a rate for a town, a government rate, that rate should be reviewable and reviewed. And that's a two-step process. One, an organization creates the rate, and a separate organization or entity reviews that first entity's job to make sure the rate is not too high, not too low, and is fair. Now, in your proposal, what you've said is that you're going to set the rate based on what other non-CMERA, C-M-E-R-A, towns are doing. And you've given us some examples of some of those towns. My question is, I have to say, I'm not comfortable with just that first step. You need the second step. You need someone else, and I prefer the select board, reviewing your proposed rates to say, yes, these seem fair and reasonable, and have that at a publicly available hearing, so you have essentially a rate hearing once a year. That was done in the town of Holliston with their ALS, where they submitted a proposal for fiscal year '24 for their BLS, ALS rates, all the various components, and the select board then had an opportunity in a public select board session to say yes, no, whatever, to make a final approval. But it's that second step that's missing in your proposal. Otherwise, I think this is great, and I think we need to do it.
So on the actual mechanism of how it happens, not to deflect, but that's an area that I would defer to the town manager on, and because it's ultimately not my decision what the method is for setting the rate. You know, that's something that I would go to my boss for, and we would discuss, and ultimately, you know, that's I hate to feel like I'm passing it off, but that's ultimately not my decision.
I have one last. The slide that you showed, first, thank you so much for this. But the slide that you showed that we were 40% of our calls are ALS and other towns is higher, made me wonder, are we wrong or are they wrong? And is there, who makes the call? Who determines whether this is an ALS response?
So the initial determination is at dispatch. The call, the complaint that you're reporting, the symptoms that you're having, that's the initial call. Now, that once EMTs are on scene, one of two things could happen. It could have been miscoded as a BLS call, and they'll arrive and say, yeah, we need medics, get the medics started. The other thing that could happen is they get to a call that was dispatched as ALS, they realize they don't need them, and they'll cancel them. And they'll cancel them because it's a BLS call. What drives whether it is BLS treatment or ALS treatment is the Massachusetts OEMS protocol. Okay. And that is our governing document, and that is ultimately what determines whether a call, you know, the symptoms, the illness warrant that level of care. That's ultimately what determines it.
And per those guidelines, would you say that today roughly 22% of our calls are receiving BLS treatment when they should have ALS?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So just to follow on to that, if I'm understanding correctly, everyone who will be working for you will be trained at an ALS level. And so when they get to the patient, they can make a call that it's not really ALS, it is a BLS level, and that's fine, and life goes on, and you still go to the emergency room or wherever. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So having the knowledge at the ALS level for every person, every staff person, is a benefit to that decision-making, even if the phone call is accurate or inaccurate?
Absolutely. Yes, and just to clarify, we don't intend to train all 44 employees that are assigned to shifts as paramedics. The number that we're looking at is 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
16 is what we need to be able to run an ALS service with 2 ambulances staffed 24/7.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Okay, it looks like we have one last question from Terry from the Select Board.
Thank you very much, Chief and your team. This answers almost all of my questions, and we look forward to having you come to the Select Board. The only thing I would say is, when you do come, the only part I still don't quite understand is when the revenue comes in, does it go into the general fund or the revolving fund, and if extra revenue might be coming in, will it maybe be able to support an ambulance in the future, et cetera, et cetera?
So that was one of the questions we received, I believe, after the presentation. The revenue, the revolving fund was approved this year at town meeting. So the revolving fund actually, its inception was July 1st. Yeah, so it's a brand-new fund, and any ambulance receipts received after July 1 will go into the revolving fund. There was a question about what is the current balance, and I don't...
So far to date is $128,000.
$128,000 in receivables since July 1. And like Assistant Chief Whitney pointed out, the medical billing tends to trail by about 60 to 90 days or more. 90 to 120 days, I think is what he said. So the second part of that question is, yes, we would love to see any excess balance be used to offset capital requests. I mean, there are communities that do it. They're able to buy their equipment and their supplies and ambulances with the excess revenue. So that we would love to be able to do that. We understand that we are expensive, and we do everything we can to try and find ways to offset that. We were talking about the grant earlier. That's one $1 million grant. In the past 5 years, we have received federal grants worth almost $500,000 for equipment, breathing apparatus and radios. We pursue every grant we can. Every year we're applying for Department of Fire Services. It's a Massachusetts state grant. It's a $20,000 grant that's about $40,000 worth of work, but Assistant Chief Latta pursues it vigorously. We apply for and receive every year a federal emergency management program grant. So any place there is a grant that we can apply for, we do. And we've been very successful with the federal grants, and I talk to my peers and they don't have that same experience. So I think we have some talented grant writers. Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. If there was one slide in this presentation that I would have preferred not to make a mistake on, it was that one about projected revenue. So. Oh, that one, yeah, the one with the one without the K, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Keep it, I'll get a copy.
And Art, just to note, there was no hands raised.
I saw that. I can see that now.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure.
Thank you. I am,
That was very interesting. Answered all my questions.
so I'm not able to share because it looks like the chief is still sharing. Maybe when he leaves the building is one. There it goes. Okay. The next item on our agenda is item number 6, checking in on Finance Committee schedule and goals. So let me share that quickly. This is our big picture schedule for the year. We're gradually shading out months here. It's amazing to think we're 4 months into the year. Not too many big picture changes. I did apply a few updates. Those are highlighted in yellow. Mostly, I tried to clarify wording. The first draft was a little wordy on what some of our big priorities were by month. Added a few meeting dates just as our schedules come into better focus. Retrospectively, I added the 2229 Main Street site visit on September 4th, and then the joint meeting with the Select Board that's slated for November the 18th on capital planning. And I'll skip ahead to the next the next slide. Likewise, the only change here, I added a meeting in December for another joint meeting with the Select Board on capital planning. But
For those months that have multiple meetings, can you clarify what's supposed to happen in each of those? So like in November, I see the priorities. Is there a priority for the 11/7 meeting versus the 11/21?
Yeah, good question. The thought there for November, the thought is we would use that later meeting for the preliminary guidelines
Okay.
discussion. The earlier meeting will be the town's fiscal year 26
good.
budget
Okay, good,
information.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll do that for the other months with multiple meetings too. I'll break
Okay.
it out.
Thank you.
Okay. But that's the case for November
And
anyway.
these two additional meetings with the select board, will we be getting calendar?
Yes, I'll follow up on that. I'll make sure you do. Okay.
Thank
So that's the schedule. It's still subject to change. It continues to evolve. I hope this is at least helpful for long-term planning and scheduling as we look ahead to the remainder of the year.
Can we post that online or not?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
You want to post it on the FinCom
Yep.
site? Can you do that, Dee?
I think I can. If not,
Lori Austin can.
Do you want to give her a version that doesn't have the yellow highlights?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll update it
Okay,
per what we
okay.
discussed, get rid of the yellow and send it to you.
okay.
Okay. And then goals. Again, hard to believe we're already 4 months into the year. These are the goals we aligned on back in May. Wanted to just repost them. I know in my day job, we set goals and then the end of the year comes and we're like, why did we what is this? Why did we sign ourselves up for this? So I want to share them periodically just as a refresher, if nothing else. On operations, per the schedule we just walked through, we're on track to hit our target dates for our big milestones. Capital, we're working on that long-term capital plan with the town and schools. We've reached consensus to treat capital similarly across budget units. Revenue, working with key stakeholders to identify and prioritize opportunities for revenue generation. We talked about that a bit in the context of the letter on MCI, the MCI Concord property. Financial policies, this was largely work done by the staff, but this has been underway for a while now. The town contracted with the Collins Center at UMass to review and refresh our financial policies. So that work is underway. Liaisons, I think we've done a great job balancing liaison assignments. Everybody's engaged and sharing updates regularly, so that's going well. Communications, there again, we're opining on issues where we think it's important to do so. Collaborating with the Carlisle Finance Committee. I am in touch with the chair of the Carlisle Finance Committee. They plan to join us at our October meeting for the presentation of the high school's fiscal year 26 budget information. And then looking ahead into the winter, they're going to join us for the public hearing on the high school's budget. That'll take some coordinating, but that's tentatively the plan.
We're going to get a budget in October?
No. They're going to share their response to our information request
Oh, okay.
in October, the letter we sent in August. And then, Dawn, this was something you had thoughts on. Working to make the 5-year tax projection and our annual report more interactive.
That's good.
So we're not there yet, but we do hope to kick off work on the annual report. I think it's, let me go back to the schedule. I think we had that, yeah, we had that slated for October. So we'll get underway on that shortly. Thoughts on our goals and our progress?
I guess not.
Okay. Our last item, I will recap our action items, a few things. I will email the draft letter regarding the MCI Concord site, and I ask folks to send me your feedback by end of day tomorrow, Friday. I will then incorporate your feedback and clean it up and get it submitted to the bridge in time for next week's deadline.
Eric, can you define what your end of day is, just so I have that in my head? I work till midnight, so.
Yeah, truthfully, I would say before midnight tomorrow.
No, it's a nebulous term that
Yeah.
different people have different definitions
Yeah.
that they think is obvious, so I thought it should be stated.
Yeah. I'll follow up with staff on getting calendar invites sent for the new meetings on the schedule. And I will clean up our schedule and send it to Dee, who will work to get it posted on the FinCom site.
Okay.
Erica, I'd also like to send that letter to the advisory board in advance of publication,
Okay.
if that, unless there's any objection. Yeah.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Look at that.